Hi, I'm Suze Burton-Wylie. I'm the performance psychologist within the British sailing team, supporting the junior, youth and pathway sailors. I'm here today with Nikki Boniface, one half of the current European champions in the Nacra. And we're going to discuss today around coping with pressure, and in particular resources and demands. So Nikki, just before we start, I just wanted to perhaps just go through a few quick slides as to kind of where we see or how we view pressure. So really pressure, if we want to really simplify it, is generally a balancing act of what our perceived demands are versus our perceived resources. And how that looks is basically if our demands, or if our perceived demands exceed the resources that we feel we have, then we're going to experience the pressure as high. Alternatively, if the resources that we have, or our perceived resources, exceed the demands, then that pressure is going to feel low in comparison. And so when I talk about demands and resources, what I mean by that is, so demands are anything exactly that. What's the demand on sailing? So you get to an important regatta, the pressure's there, you get to the youth worlds, you're experiencing the pressure. The demands could be, this is going to be a lot of effort against a really good fleet, it's going to be tiring, it's going to be energy draining. Another demand could be expectation. You're going in as a favourite, or at least expectation of finishing the top 5, top 10. Whatever that expectation is on yourself, by yourself or from others. If we don't have the resources to cope with those demands, then that's where we'll struggle. Where if we do have the resources, such as self-confidence, we're really sure in our preparation, we feel like we've prepared really well. And when I talk about preparation, it could be anything from having a really clear routine that you need to follow, making sure that you've worked on your fitness, making sure that you've worked on your strategies, your planning. If you're in a double-handed boat with your team member, work on what you need to focus on as a group. And then I also talk about approach goals, and what I mean by that is the way you're approaching that regatta. So a very simple way of looking at it is instead of saying I mustn't lose places downwind, how about just phrasing it slightly differently and saying, I must hold my position downwind? The message is the same. You essentially don't want to lose places, but it's a far more positive spin on the same message. So that's what we mean really in terms of demands and resources. So when you're in a pressurized event, coming up to a pressurized event or outcome, and it could be the youth worlds, or it could be a local sailing regatta where everyone's looking at you to say they're in the youth sailing team, they're the one to beat. It really depends on how you perceive that pressure, that appraisal. So Nikki, based on the demands and resources then, what are some of the demands that you've faced throughout your sailing career, from junior youth to your current position? Just some of the demands that you think you faced.
At youth level, some of the demands would be, I was the one to beat nationally. Was national youth champion 3 times. And so going into even the last few, even though I felt quite prepared and confident, there's still that, or we're the ones that are that kind of expected to do well and to say, reigning champions. And so that was one thing. And then another thing is ISF Youth Worlds, went 3 times. Every time I went, I had more pressure on myself, because I believed, and other people truly believe we should have done better the time before. And also on the fact that you've been before and you feel like there's even more pressure on you to start performing. So they were, I'd say, my youth pressures. And then I think the biggest pressure I've had in my sailing career has been the last year. We had Olympic trials going on for nearly a whole year. Every regatta mattered, every point mattered. Us and Anna and John, who've now been selected for the games, we were neck and neck. You couldn't really write it or predict it. we just were inseparable all year, and it just put so much pressure on everything we did. I also was returning from injury, and the first regatta I returned from injury after not competing for 6 weeks in a major regatta was the first one of the trials. And that really put a huge demand on that regatta that I had to then deal with. And then through the year, even decisions on our training, where we would be, what we prioritise, had so much weight behind it all year, because there was no room for a mistake, because we were right behind each other. So they've been the huge demands that I've experienced so far in my sailing career.
Yeah, thank you. And so I suppose, you've talked there about two separate occasions, so at youth level and the current very recent demand. And although they were for very different reasons or events, the common theme was that there was pressure because it mattered. At the youth worlds, the demand was the expectation of, actually we should be at the top, we're the one to beat. And then from the Olympic trials perspective, it perhaps wasn't that we're the ones to beat, it was almost, we can't write this, and the demand was that the effort it took over and over and over again to turn up and perform at regattas for a whole year. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for sharing both of those. If I go back to the youth side for a second, then, where the demand was probably more expectation, how did you cope with that?
So self-confidence has been something I've had to work on through my whole career and in life. Anyone that knows me would tell you that. And so I think that's why I sail a double-handed boat, because actually that then gave me the confidence to push my boundaries, push the limits and what I believe was possible. But you can do that without needing someone else. It's just what I needed. And so then to find my own kind of confidence in what I could do came down to preparation, and also physical preparation. This is just for me personally. I sailed a boat that was probably slightly too big for me, and I sailed against boys from a young age, and still now I compete against men, and I'm expected to perform in the same way. And so I gained confidence by knowing I was strong enough and fit enough to perform, to know that on the 5th day of regatta I could do the same as I could on day one, and other people to start struggling. But if it was windy, great, that means I've got a gain already. And that's where I got my confidence from. And to turn up to the youth camp and know, I used to worry about some of the fitness stuff, and then suddenly I worked really hard on it, and that was no longer a stress. And so that took another one of the expectations away, that I had got to perform in that on land as well as so that was one way I dealt with it, by basically making myself as fit as possible for the job at that age and the kind of time commitments. And then from that, also the preparation, and knowing that given what I had and the resource I had, I'd done everything I could to that point, and that was my best I could be. And if it wasn't enough, then I was still happy with what I'd given it. That makes sense. That sometimes things don't go your way. Sometimes you can, a bit like now, you can be one of the best in the world, but there's someone also very good, like someone else best in the world. And it depends what your goal is, and that's where you need to have your own kind of goals, not just kind of outcome goals. You also need to just know why you do it for yourself, and if you've given it everything and you've prepared in the way that you feels right, it hasn't quite worked, then our sport has a lot of uncontrollables in it, and I think you need to just make sure you keep taking the positives and the strengths out of what you have achieved.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice reflection in probably stemmed from more recent times, but also over the kind of time that your sailing career to date, is that you're right, sailing has a lot of uncontrollables. But the message I got there is, the message that I really liked, which is probably linked to all of this in a way, is that enjoyment, that what kind of why you're doing what you're doing, and linked to your goals and not just the outcome. If you go to win every race, then you can't control what the other sailors are doing. You can't control what happens on the course that day, the weather, the tide, all those different things. But if you can have some process goals as well, so what do I want to take from this regatta? What would be a huge learning as well? I think that's a really nice message that's part of this conversation. But then in terms of the demands at youth level with that expectation, how you started to manage that with the preparation. So, and what then fed in nicely was that helped boost your confidence. So they're hugely linked. So the expectation was a demand, but you decided to, if you knew that you'd prepared really well, if you took, you mentioned the fitness, as soon as I knew I was fit enough, that demand went away, that fitness demand went away. It then gave you confidence because you knew that you would have gains in heavier wins. And I think that's a really important message, is preparation. And how would you, I talked earlier about approach goals. So in those moments of, at the Youth Worlds, for example, where the expectation was high, how did you ensure or try, and we're humans, so we all slip into the different areas sometimes, but how did you try to approach that in a positive way? So like I discussed earlier, instead of saying I must, sailing to prevent something rather than sailing to gain something.
I think sometimes it helps to kind of break a race, like the course up, or break the race up into different sections, because it's very easy to be like, oh, I want to win the race. Yeah, that's what everyone wants to do. And so I remember we went in there having goals, not just the outcome goals, but how we wanted to race, what our goals was during each race. And that's when it became tough, or when the pressure is really high, you kind of forget, very hard, but you try and forget about the outcome on what the big picture is. And actually, right, race number 1, we really need to get off this start line, or like our goal was to hold a lane out of that start, or be on the line. And then I think you can almost, if you compartmentalize the race a bit more, or focus on, say, specific areas, so it's not just one big unmanageable goal, you can then kind of put your focus and your nerves into kind of maybe an area, and rather than getting distracted by the whole thing, you can then really focus on that thing and use the pressure and your nerves to perform that task, rather than it just becoming all too much to manage. And it's hard, and when it goes, say if you had a really bad day or a few bad races, and it's hard to keep doing that. But I thought you need to remember is, if you don't do that, if you don't switch off from, like, kind of push away some of the bad and negative feelings or reactions to what's happening, you're never going to get better. And as soon as you realize that if you just get angry about it the whole time, you're not going to grow. And that's where I think, if you can create these goals that are smaller and manageable in a race and not negative, just a way to measure yourself the whole time, I think it's a much easier way to assess yourself, and for the long term, kind of to make you keep going.
So what I heard there, Nikki, is that in those pressured events, you would be task focused rather than outcome focused. There's a process there, even in that outcome environment, you're able to focus on something that you as a boat would like to work on.
Yeah.
So something happens mid-race that something out of your control, but just ruins the race for you, and you can't do anything about it. If you've only gone into that race with the intention to win, which, like you said, everyone wants to win, then that whole race would be deemed a failure. Where yeah, of course the result hasn't changed, but you can still come out of that race having taken something away from that and learned something as a boat. And like you said, the growth, always look for what you can learn from a race, from a training day. And that's in your control, isn't it?
And something that really sticks in my mind linked to that is, I remember, well, I think it's quite recently though, but we came fifth in a race that we'd worked so hard for that fifth place, and it was so much better for the overall scoreboard than where we were at the beginning of the race or whatever. Like, and stuff had gone wrong, and we fought, and actually we were like almost happy in a way that we'd overcome whatever had gone wrong. I can't remember what it was now, and then actually how we'd raced the rest of the race, like smart, consistent, all those things. And then there was a time where we won a race or come second, and actually we've been quite annoyed at ourselves because either we've lost that one place if we'd led the whole race, and even if we'd won, sometimes we'd made errors that we deemed weren't okay to have made, or that we could have avoided, or that we could have had that one place more if we hadn't. And so it's not all about your results, it's actually about what you set out to do and what is important at that time, and your goals to make you that overall better sailor and for the scoreboard in the long run. And so those two really stick in my mind. It's not always about necessarily the win.
Sure. And I think, again, another really key message is that, of course, when it comes to a one-off event like the Olympic Games or like the European Championships, I know they're not one day events, but that, it is about going there to do as well as you can. But there's so much else that can be taken from that. And I really like the message that, by the sounds of it, out of those few races that you've just described, the fifth, which was the lowest position out of those few races, was probably the most satisfying.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Nikki, thank you for that. And I think that's a really nice way to just finish that kind of key message, is that when it comes to our resources, such as our confidence, our preparation, the way we approach regattas, if they don't meet the demands of that regatta, so if all we focus on is the demands and we haven't built the resources, then, or even our perception of it is that it's more of the demand. So the examples you provided earlier around going in, being the one to be, if that's what you'd focused on, then you would have deemed that regatta to be a threat, and it would have created unhelpful thoughts and unhelpful physical reactions, which would have hindered your performance. Where if you can do the opposite, if you can allow your resources to meet the demands, so yeah, the expectation's still there, but like you said, you didn't go in with just that thought of I have to win. You went in with, yes, I want to win, but I've built up my resources. I know my preparation's really key. I know I've got a routine. I don't need to worry about that. I know that I'm going to get some gains in heavier winds. All of a sudden, that changes the way you perceive that event. It's exactly the same event, but the way you perceive it is different. And you then see it as a challenge. And what that means is that you experience helpful thoughts and helpful feelings, which then help improve or help with an optimal performance for yourself and for your helm. And I think that the thing as well that we talked about is you can grow your resources. These aren't fixed. It's like you said before, that growth mindset, which we do have in the online, what we cover on the online resources, is that we've got, and the link for the online resources will be at the bottom of the video in the details. But yeah, you can grow that. We can grow that. We can grow our confidence. We can build and work on that. We can work on our preparation, and also we can work on the way that we frame what we're going into the regatta for and what we want to achieve out of that. So yeah, that's my kind of quick summary key message. But Nikki, again, I'll hand over to you just for the final say to any youth sailors watching this, who are perhaps looking at, kind of thinking to themselves now, well, what resources do I have? What would be your advice, where to start?
again, I think you need to review something you've done recently, a training or a competition, and find the areas that were harder and the ones that were good, and then break those down, and then basically just work out what resources can you find to help those bits that went maybe harder, or to make super strengths out of the things that you find easier. And just, it all comes to kind of breaking a regatta down and aspects of sailing, and working out how you can prepare, make routines, who's around you that helps you, who gives you energy, all those different parts of our sport then build up to make the big kind of outcome. So yeah, just review what you've done recently and start to put into place, or have a think about what things you can use to build up those resources and the confidence. But I'd put my money on preparation is a huge one. So like, if you know you've done your best, then it will help a lot.
Yeah. Preparation is key. And there's so many facets to preparation. So if you can start to prepare.
Yeah, definitely. Build those routines and make them normal. So it helps a lot.
That's great advice, Nikki. Thank you.